morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is the headlines in the Herald, the ZANU-PF newspaper, controlled newspaper. Assets recovered. Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission identifies 7 billion US dollars in cash and properties stashed away in various parts of the world, including the UK, USA, Switzerland, Spain, Singapore, Malaysia, and Hong Kong. This is disappointing, to say the least. President Mnangagwa, when he took over office, following the 2017 military coup, he promised to stamp out corruption. And he set up this commission to do just that. So what we can say now is, after 7 years in office, the commission has only managed to recover 7 billion. That's roughly 1 billion per year. It is disappointing, because according to the documentary, the Jazeera Gold Mafia documentary last year, Zimbabwe is losing 80% of its US $2 billion per year gold trade. That's $1.6 billion is being smuggled out. And this commission is only recovering 1 billion per year. So it's even failing to catch up with those who are smuggling gold alone. And we know that it is not only gold that is being smuggled. The same applies to diamonds, lithium, and other resources. A few years ago, a Canadian NGO reported that Robert Mugabe alone was pocketing as much as US $2 billion a year from diamonds. 2 billion. And ZACC is supposed, and this commission, Anti-Corruption Commission, is supposed to be identifying money looted over the years. And yet it's hopeless, absolutely hopeless. But let's put this 7 billion into perspective. Even if we say we'll restrict ourselves to 7 billion, what we've got to say is how much would the country have gained if that money had been used for the good of the country? Well, one of the areas where Zimbabwe has suffered a great deal was in the power supply. Ever since the country's independence in 1980, Zimbabwe has failed to build enough power generation to meet the country's needs. When the country gained its independence, it was given the feasibility studies for 2 major projects. Batoka Gorge, which is between Victoria Falls and Kariba Dam. And to the ordinary person out there, Batoka Gorge would just be the equivalent of having another Kariba. because you dam the water, you generate with it, let it flow out into the Kariba, you generate with it again, and then you let it flow out. So it would have doubled Kariba, if you want. And with the 7 billion, you would have also built Hwange unit number 7 and unit number 8, which the regime has only managed to build last year. And with that same 7 billion, I believe you would have also built a thermal power station near Kwekwe. We've got coal there near Kwekwe, and that has not been developed. And with those 3 power stations alone, supplying electricity to the country, load shedding would have been, if not completely eliminated, at least not as bad as we have seen it. Now, think of the downstream economic benefits of that over the last 44 years. That's when you realize the seriousness of our situation. I believe if those generation power stations had been built, we would have added at least 70 billion to our GDP. In today's prices. 70 billion. Zimbabwe had the potential to become the South Korea of Africa. But we failed to do so because of corruption and mismanagement. The promise by Mnangagwa that he was going to stamp out corruption was just an empty promise. The man did not even have the political will to do so. The lady we are seeing here, she was the chairperson, I don't know whether she still is, of the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission. She is the wife of the late Sibusiso Moyo, Minister of Foreign Affairs, after the coup. It is no secret that the police, the army, the CIO, and the prison services, each of them had their own diamond mining concession in Hwange. And Sibusiso Moyo, together with the present VP Hwange, were the top brass in the army, and no doubt would have been benefiting from the looting in Hwange. As I said, Mugabe on his own, he was paying $2 billion worth, according to a Canadian NGO. And therefore then to appoint chairperson of the Anti-Corruption Commission, somebody who is the wife of one of those who would have been involved in the looting of the diamonds, clearly shows that this regime does not have the will to deal with corruption. We know that the police, those who have fallen out with the regime, the likes of former police commissioner Augustine Chiuri, the regime has since exposed that he had $32 million worth of property. He was top brass in the police, and he would have got his cut of the looting of the diamonds. And by the way, these mining concessions have since been extended to other areas. The army, the police, and so forth, they are involved in many other activities right now. So the amount of money that is there is a lot more than 7 billion. And if we are recovering only 1 billion per year, to be quite honest, this is just, yes, the 7 billion would have made a lot of difference. But nonetheless, if we are serious about stamping out corruption, to expect that ZANU-PF, by the way, Mnangagwa himself was named in the Gold Mafia documentary. And this is not the first time he was named in some of these corruption activities. The UN investigated the looting of diamonds and other resources in the Democratic Republic of Congo in the 1990s when there was war there. And Mnangagwa was one of the Zimbabwe officials, was named by the UN as having been involved in the looting of DRC resources. And so he was named in the Mafia, Gold Mafia documentary. In other words, he's the godfather of the corruption. And to seriously expect to see he would want to stamp it out is naive, to say the least. What matters here is that the people of Zimbabwe have got to realize that they cannot afford this criminal waste of resources. The country is in serious economic trouble. Most of our basic services have all but collapsed. It is heartbreaking that in this, the 21st century, at least 60% of our population are still living in mud huts with no running water, no toilet facilities. They still have to use the bush. Shocking. Even the urban centers, with all that population harmed in, you hear that they go for months on end without running water. Of course, the sewage system cannot be working without water. How is it possible that in this day and age, people can live in those squalid conditions? Our education services have all but collapsed. Decades of being starved of funding have reduced the quality of our education to disappointing, to say the least. It is not unusual to hear that rural schools have got 0% pass rate in grade 7, Form 2, Form 3. And it is not surprising. When you have failed, you do not repeat the year. They moved on to the next grade. Last year, a senior official in the Ministry of Education told a parliamentary committee that there are some students in Zimbabwe who are doing Form 3, and yet they can't read and write. They can't do grade 3 stuff. Somebody who has just done 3 formal years of education. These people have done 10, and still they cannot do what somebody who has done only the 3rd grade can do. This is the result of this culture of quantity. There's no quality there. Most of our teachers, qualified teachers, have left the country if they could. Or they're so poorly remunerated that even with the best will in the world, you cannot deliver quality education. When are we going to allow this madness to continue? One of the annoying things about this rampant corruption is, of course, that the regime is using the looted wealth to bankroll its activities. Last year, when the country was going through its election, Mnangagwa was spending money as if there's no tomorrow. The lady there, she is, like I said, or was the chairperson of the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, and she's a chief justice. All the judges in Zimbabwe were paid $400,000 housing allowance. They've never been budgeted for. It's not part of their remuneration at all. This was just a gift from His Excellency. They were not the only ones. Those in the police, the army, the CIO, and other senior officials involved with the election process, they were also handsomely rewarded. Chiefs, each one of the chiefs received a twin cab truck. Where did the money come from? From the looting, of course. So the rampant looting of resources that is going on now is helping to keep ZANU-PF in power. And those who are involved in the looting have an invested interest in making sure that ZANU-PF stays in power. The gold, the diamonds should have been a blessing to the country. And now they've become our curse. I go back to the headline by the Herald. This is nothing to be crawling about. Corruption is still rampant in Zimbabwe. And the Anti-Corruption Commission is not even scratching the surface. What we are seeing, what they've recovered here, is nothing more than the ears of a hippo. The rest of the ugly beast is buried, is hiding in the muddy water. We really need to seriously address these challenges. I don't think we can end corruption without first ending this ZANU-PF dictatorship. As long as ZANU-PF is able to rig elections, the corruption and mismanagement will continue. The best way forward, the best hope is for us to address the problem of the ZANU-PF rigging the elections. Is there any chance of getting any meaningful reforms implemented now? Well, ZANU-PF control that parliament, and I don't see them wanting to implement any reforms. However, what we can do is to make sure that we do not participate in these flawed elections. One of the really disappointing things that happened last year was that the opposition, Nelson Chamisa and company, conned the people of Zimbabwe to participate in those flawed elections. He knew that the elections was flawed. He knew that by participating, you only give ZANU-PF legitimacy. But he also knew that those who participate will get a few seats on the gravy train. And that he could not resist. The very fact that 2 million participated in those elections and voted for Chamisa alone clearly shows that we've got a serious problem. How anyone could be conned into believing that Chamisa had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes beggars belief. Ignorance is a serious problem in Zimbabwe among the electorate, particularly among the fanatical opposition supporters. This personality cult mentality has been ingrained into them to the point where they no longer think for themselves. Anyone who would believe that Chamisa had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes when he had failed to get to even secure a verified voters roll, it's got to be incredibly naive. And they were. 2 million of them. And unless we can do something about it, I think the same head will be participating in the 2028 elections, and ZANU-PF will have legitimacy again. And so the corruption will continue. No doubt, the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission will be reporting that they've recovered $8 billion of cash and properties. After all, they'll be in their 8th year. They only are able to recover $1 billion per year. And we are losing 80%, 2 billion gold trade per year. That's 1.6 billion in gold alone. How anyone can think that is adequate beggars belief. Zimbabwe cannot afford this criminal waste of resources. That's the truth. It has gone on for 44 years. Zimbabwe cannot afford to have another rigged election and thus perpetuate this ZANU-PF dictatorship. That is the truth. It is within our powers to stop it. Like I said, we cannot stop we cannot get ZANU-PF to implement reforms, not in the present setup, but we can as hell as well make sure that people do not participate in a flawed election just to give ZANU-PF legitimacy. We have got a task of educating these opposition supporters who have been brainwashed to the point of becoming utterly useless. They cannot think for themselves. How anyone could believe Chamisa's lie after lie beggars belief. He lied in 2018 that he had stringent measures to stop ZANU-PF rigging the elections. We know he didn't. And then he came around 2023 and come up with another lie. I've plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. We have got to stop this madness. That I cannot overemphasize. Zimbabwe is in serious trouble, economic and political trouble. We have to deal with this problem. It's not going to go away. We have got to deal with it. Think about it. Before I close, I'll just look at one comment here. Thank you, Regis. It is, are we making any plans to recover the money from these people once they leave office? Because obviously they would want to run away once they leave office. Well, at the present moment, Regis, what you've got to admit is as long as ZANU-PF remains in power, even those who have left office have managed to keep their loot. Look at the Mugabes. They still have their loot. Mnangagwa is protecting them. This is why you find, as much as even G40 hated being booted out of office, they also know that they're better with ZANU-PF in power. Because at least they're hanging on to their looted wealth. As long as ZANU-PF or one faction of ZANU-PF is still in power, yes, of course, those who are no longer in power are at the risk. I think most of those people with the 77 billion that has been identified, I can rest assure you, most of those are, if they were in government, they were part of the G40. Those in Mnangagwa's faction, they've been ring-fenced, they're protected. Some of it has got to do with even trying to reveal individuals, because some of those individuals would have been part and parcel of the looting ring. And therefore, then, if the regime was to go after them, they will spill the beans. And the regime is afraid of that. And in any case, most of these individuals who are in power, they are busy looting. They are not interested in chasing those who have looted and run away with the wealth. Unless, of course, is to recover it for themselves. So the main business is to loot, not to recover some of that wealth. By the way, that headline was saying they've identified, they've not recovered most of that 7 billion yet. It could take another 2-3 years before they ever recover it, if they ever do. Like I said, most of those people involved in the commission itself do not have clean hands themselves. And that is why the regime appointed them, because they know the regime has got a means of controlling them. So yes, even if they get out of office, we'll probably never recover it. And as long as we have got ZANU-PF in power, I don't think we'll ever stamp out corruption. And at this rate, as you can see, what we are doing is absolutely minimal. We are recovering 7 billion a year, and smuggled gold alone is 1.6 billion per year. I mean, it's clear from the maths that you are playing catch up hopelessly. They're not doing anything. They're only losing 1 out of 6 billion, even if you were saying it's all from the gold smugglers. It's still a lot to them. 0.6 billion US dollars, that's a lot of money. But again, like I said, this is collective and over the whole period. Don't know how far back, soon after independence, how much was being looted over all those years. And to have only identified 7 billion, it's the ears of the hippo, my friend. There's nothing to be joyful about on that score. So my last word is ZANU-PF is not stamping out corruption. Corruption is rampant. And the worst thing about it is that part of the looted wealth is now bankrolling the regime stay in power, as we saw last year, making it even more difficult to have any meaningful change in Zimbabwe. But again, on a cheerful note, change is possible. All we've got to do is have the discipline to say, no, we want free, fair, and credible elections. At the present moment, the opposition is sold out on that score. They had the opportunity to implement the reforms during the NU, they did not. And they had the opportunity to stop participating in flawed elections. They've been participating in flawed elections for the purposes of getting their share of the spoils of power. Our strength as individuals lies in educating, particularly the MDC head, to stop being so ignorant, naive, and gullible, to be easily conned into participating in elections, one election after another, only to give ZANU-PF legitimacy and perpetuate the dictatorship. That is not rocket science. Thank you very much for listening, and have a good day.